Okay, today I will review a paper entitled Risk Assessment and Risk Management Review of Recent Advance on their Foundation, right by Terjeavan and published in European Journal of Operational Research in 2016. Okay, what is the risk? According to ISO 31000, risk is the effect of uncertainty on objective. In the context of management, risk is often calculated using the formula risk equals probability times consequence. However, with the changing times, we face many new challenges, such as supply chain globalization, cyber threats, climate change, technological disruption, and global pandemic and unpredictable economic crisis. Ultimately, the all approaches are deemed inaccurate for risk analysis. Therefore, they often conduct related research, risk assessment, and risk management review of recent advance on their foundation. The primary objective of this research is to review existing progress and developments, focusing on the fundamental ideas and thinking that underpin them. This research, the authors hope, will provide a new perspective on risk assessment and risk management. In this study, the author used the literature review method by collecting several previous studies which were then analyzed to see the latest developments, weaknesses of all approaches, and opportunities for improvement of the latest methods in their future. The concept of risk and risk assessment has a long history. For the most part, these ideas and principles remain fundamental today. They are the foundation for the risk assessment and management practice we have since the 1970 and 1980. However, the field has evolved significantly since then. New, more sophisticated analytical methods and techniques have been developed, and risk analysis approaches and methods are now used across most sectors of society. The risk area has two main tests. The first one, using risk assessment and risk management to study and address the risk of specific activities. Second, con- conducting research and development of generic risk relate to concepts, theories, frameworks, approaches, principles, method, and models to understand, assess, criteria, communicate, and manage or organize risk. And the main topic that will be discussed are risk analysis and science, risk conceptualization, uncertainty in risk assessment, risk management principle and strategies with a particular focus on dealing with measure of proven uncertainties, surprise, and the aspect and the future risk assessment and management. For example, consider the conceptualization of race. There are a number of different definitions which can be said to create tension. However, integrative thinking encourages the search for perspectives that transcend this definition. It use of CNS to reach new levels of understanding. Forthcoming review will highlight work in this direction and discuss the trends we see in race research. Submit by Hanson 2013 states that science is the practice that provides us with the most epistemically grounded statements that can be made at this time about the subjects covered by the scientific disciplinary community, namely about nature, ourselves as human beings, our societies, our physical contractions, and the contraction of our minds. Next, we will discuss in more detail how science relates to career risk assessment and risk management activity, particularly the process by which science is used as the basis for decision making about risk. Okay, right. Okay, this is it can be seen in the picture. Data and information gathered through testing and analysis about a phenomenon provide evidence. This data and information contribute to a knowledge base, which is the collection of all threats, fairly trust claims, and beliefs held by a group of experts and scientists concerned for further research and analysis in the field. The evidence and knowledge base shall be free of non-epistemic values. These values are assumed, assumed to be added only in the third stage, concluding that an activity is sufficiently safe is a judgment based on science and values. Interpreting the knowledge base is often quite complex because it must be done against a background of general scientific knowledge. We may have tests a product. Okay, this is step in which the knowledge base is evaluated and a summary assessment made of the risk and uncertainties involved in the case under investigation. However, the assessment doesn't stop there. Decision makers need to look beyond risk evaluation. They need to combine the risk information they have received with information from other sources and other topics. Figure one, we refer to this as decision maker various value based considerations. It may also include police-related considerations about risk and safety not addressed in expert review. Like expert review, it's based on a combination of factual and value-based considerations. Okay, just now we have mentioned knowledge several times, but okay, we okay, I mentioned knowledge several times, but what does it what that it mean in this context? Glossary Society for Risk Analysis, the New refers to two types of knowledge: expertise and practical knowledge are justified belief. Knowledge is acquired through, for example, scientific methodology and peer review, experience and testing. And risk assessment can also be seen as a tool used to represent and describe knowledge. And lot of knowledge and then other criteria need to be used to evaluate reliability and validity, as well as whether the assessment is a scientific method. This topic is discussed by Hanson and Evan. They provide several examples of useful science-based decision-making support that align with these ideas. First, characterization of the resilience of natural, technological, and social systems and the interaction between them. Characterization of uncertainty and the robustness of different types of knowledge relevant to risk management, as well as ways to reduce some of this uncertainty and make knowledge more robust, and investigation aimed at uncovering specificness or gaps in the knowledge on which risk management is based. The study of success and failures in previous response to surprising and unexpected events. Okay, returning to the concept of integrative thinking intro introduced in the first section, we can point to a tension between the idea that risk assessment fails to meet the criteria of the traditional scientific method and the idea that risk assessment shall be a robust and useful method for supporting risk decision making. The result shift in perspective on risk assessment from accurate risk estimation to characterizing knowledge, and lack of knowledge can be seen as a consequence of this thinking. The why I wanna change my background. Okay, next we will discuss the conceptualization of risk. Here is a summary of definition of risk from the Society for Risk Analysis. Overall, qualitative definition of risk. First, the possibility of an undesirable event occurring. Second, the potential for united negative consequence of an event. Third, explore to a possibility, for example, the occurrence of a loss, the certainty of which is still uncertain. Four, the consequence of such activities and the associated uncertainties. Five, the uncertain and severity of the consequence of an activity related to something valued by humans. Six, the occurrence of certain consequence of the activity and the associated uncertainties. And the last, the deviation from the reference value and the associated uncertainty. This definition essentially expressed the same idea. adding a dimension of uncertainty to events and consequence. Next, we enter into examples of metric or risk descriptions. First, the combination of probability and magnitude or severity of consequence. Second, expect consequence. For example, calculate by estimate number of deaths in a certain time period or estimate number. Um, wait, okay. Estimate number of deaths in a certain time period of estimate number of, I'm sorry, estimate number of deaths in certain time period or estimate number of deaths per unit of expire time, the result of multiplying the probability of a hazard occurring and the probability that the object in question is exposed to that hazard, as well as the estimate damage that occurs and the object is exposed to that hazard. The last term is a vulnerability metric, expect plus. The appropriateness of this metric or descriptions depends on the situation. None of these examples can be considered a risk per se, and the appropriateness of a metric or a description can always be questioned. For example, expected consequence can be informative for large populations and individual risk, but not vice versa. How we understand and describe risk significantly influence how it's analyzed and can therefore have serious implementations for risk management and decision making. There shall be no reason why some current perspectives shall not be eliminated, as in many cases they only mislead decision makers. A prime example is the use of expect less as a general concept of risk. Okay, next comes uncertainty in risk assessment. Probability analysis is the dominant method used to handle the uncertainty involved in risk analysis, but but aleatory or representing variation and epistemic or due to lack of knowledge. For aleatory uncertain, there is widespread agreement on the use of probability with a limit interpretation of relative frequency. However, for representing and expressing epistemic uncertain, the answer is not so straightforward. The Bayesian subjective probability approach is the most common, but many alternatives have been proposed, including interval probability. Next, there are risk management principles and strategies. Before discussing recent developments in fundamental risk management principles and strategies, it's useful to review two well established pillars of risk management. First, main risk management strategies available. There are three main strategies that are generally used to manage risk. Risk-informed strategies, pres- pre- precautionary or preventive strategies, and discursive strategies. Second, risk management process structure. The process can be broken down into the following steps. Uh, Establishing the context, which means, for example, defining the purpose of the risk management activity and determining target and criteria. Identify situations and events that could impact the activity under consideration and establish ob- objective. Many methods have been developed for this task, including checklists, heads-up, and PME. Conducting cause and effect analysis of this event. Using techniques such as fault tree analysis, event tree analysis, and Bayesian networks. Make an assessment of the likelihood of the event occurring and its consequence, and establish a description or characterization of the risk. Risk evaluation to assess the significance of the risk. Risk treatment. Okay, risk assessment provides decision-making support for selecting alternatives, accepting activities and products, implementing risk reduction measures, and so on. The collection of risk information is often complemented by decision analysis tools such as cost-benefit analysis, cost-effectiveness analysis, and multi-attribute analysis. This method all share a systematic approach to organizing the pros and cons of a decision alternative, but differ in the extent to which one is willing to explicitly compare the factor in the problem. Risk management is closely related to policy and policy analysis. Policy can be defined as a principle or plan to guide the decision making and achieve desired outcomes. And the term applies to international organizations, governments, private sector organizations, and groups and individuals. Policy development and implementation are often structured through the following stage, inspired by decision-making theory. Offers problem identification, recognition of an issue that requires further, further attention. Generating alternatives analysis. The process includes aspects such as policy instrument development, consultation, deliberation, and coordination, decision making, implementation, evaluation. Okay, linking stage with stage one. This process is called the policy cycle. This cycle has similar elements to those found in quality and project management to ensure continuous improvement, plan, implement, learn, and action. The risk area provides input into elements of the policy process, for example, by uh, first conceptualization and characterization of problems or issues, including aspects such as objectives, criteria, risk, uncertainties, knowledge, and priority. Priority. frame the problem by clarifying and highlighting key principle and dilemmas, such as the balance between development and value creation, creation on the one hand and protection on the other. Statistical data analysis to identify the hazards or threats that most contribute to risk, and in this way guide decision making about where to most effectively, effectively reduce risk. Risk assessment and in particular quantified risk assessment of potential development alternatives to be able to compare the risk of these alternatives and relate them to possible criteria as well as the other considerations such as costs. Risk perception and related studies provide insight into how different actors perceive risk and what concern they have regarding risk and their potential consequence. Next comes the precautionary principle. The common interpretations are uh, first, a principle that states that if the consequence of an activity could be researched and there is still scientific uncertainty, the the precautions shall be taken or the activity shall not be carried out. A principle that states that regulatory action may be taken in situations where a potential hazard agent may cause harm to humans or the environment, even if conclusive evidence of the potential harmful effect is not yet available. Okay, next is resilience strategies play a key role in dealing with risk uncertainty and potential shocks. The level of resilience of a system or organization is related to its ability to maintain or recover its basic functions after a stressor. A resilient system has the ability to respond to regular and irregular threats in a resilient yet flexible manner, monitor what is happening, including one's own performance, anticipate anticipate risk events and opportunities learned from experience. A combination of vigilance, rapid detection, and early response, failure can be avoided. Much work has been done. Now we come to the risk criteria. Risk management is about balancing various considerations such as profitability, safety, reputation, and so on. Generally, a person considers a range of alternatives, evaluates their pros and cons, and makes a decision that best aligns with the decision makers' values and priority. In this process, constraints are usually applied, particular those related to safety, to simplify to overall assessment and ensure certain things. The alert principle, alert is as low as reasonably practicable, practicable is commonly adopted risk reduction principle based on risk-aware and precautionary thinking. It's based on the idea of substantial dis- disequilibrium and states that risk reduction measures should be implemented unless it can be demonstrated that the costs are outweighed by the benefits. Social risk decision making is increasingly challenging, characterized, characterized by a deserve diverse, di- diverse range of stakeholders. Some of the challenge and research issues issue that need to be focused on the relate to among others. Evan and Zio. First, how shall the result of risk and curtains assessments be explained, visualized, visualized, and communicated so that they can be used informatively in in the societal the societal decision making process involving many diverse stakeholders are described above. How risk acceptance is a need to be viewed in relation to the measure, measurement, measurement tools used to make judgments about risk acceptance, taking into account value generating process at the societal level. How managerial review and assessment should be defined in this context. The main issues we need to address are in intergenerational decision-making situations, what frameworks and perspectives are available? What are the other options? When are different frameworks more appropriate than others? How do we capture key knowledge issues and current and future uncertainties? Uncertainties? What are our obligations to protect future generations? How can we describe and present the result of risk assessment in a way that is usable to decision makers? Clearly presenting the assumptions made and their justification in relation to to the knowledge on which the assessment is based. How can we present risk information without misinforming people about what we know and don't know? How can we accurately, how can we accurately represent and account for uncertainty in a way that justifies confidence in risk outcomes? And how can we tell how good the experts' judgments are and how can we improve them? In near misanalysis, how shall we construct the multidimensional space of causal proximity among scenarios to measure how close a near misses to an actual accident. Okay, we now turn to the conclusion as the final section of this discussion. This assessment and risk management are well established as scientific fields and make important contributions to supporting practical decision making. Basic principle, theories, and methods have existed and continue to evolve. This review paper focused on recent work and advances that encompass that fundamental ideas and thinking that underpin the field of risk. Okay, thank you.